I shot my brother-in-law in the knee that night. Not to kill him, but to make sure he'd never walk into another boardroom without remembering the sound of my voice whispering his betrayal. The bullet was a .22, small and precise, like the lies he'd fed me for years. And as he crumpled on the Persian rug of his McLean mansion, blood seeping into the wool like ink on a confession, I leaned down and said, "This is for the contracts you called silly, Mark. For the empire you stole while I took the fall." His eyes widened, not in pain, but in the dawning horror that I'd finally pieced together his web, every thread of deceit, every forged signature that had buried me under federal scrutiny while he pocketed the shadows. It started with a wedding vow and ended with a smoking gun. But in between, God. The layers of rot that festered in the underbelly of DC's power games. I was Lola Hargrove then, not yet the ghost haunting Georgetown's cocktail circuits, but a rising star in defense contracting. The kind of woman who could charm a senator over crab cakes at the Hay Adams and close a deal on encrypted back channels before the appetizers hit the table. Mark was my sister's husband, the golden boy from Yale Law, with that Ivy League smirk that made you think he was on your side until the knife twisted. He called my work silly contracts, harmless legalese for boutique deals on surveillance tech. He said, waving them off like cocktail napkins at a fundraiser. But those silly pages? They were the linchpins of Nato's Eastern Flank security packs. Multi-million-dollar firewalls against Russian incursions. The kind of agreements that kept headlines from screaming World War III every Tuesday. I'd sign them in blood and sweat, pulling all-nighters in my foggy bottom apartment. Fueled by black coffee and the ghosts of my father's unfulfilled dreams, he'd been a Vietnam vet-turned-Pentagon pencil pusher, dying bitter with a liver pickled in regret. I was avenging him in every clause, every non-disclosure that shielded allies from leaks. Mark knew that. Hell, he'd reviewed them himself. His Montblanc pen slashing, redundant, across margins that hid the real gold, proprietary algorithms for drone swarms, worth 8 figures if you knew where to sell. And he did. Oh. He knew exactly where. The hook that snagged me first wasn't his charm, it was the secret I buried for him. 3 years into our family's tangled dance, Mark came to me one drizzly autumn evening, his Jaguar idling outside my DuPont Circle brownstone like a bad omen. "Lola," he said, voice cracking over the patter of rain on the windshield. "I fucked up. Big." He'd been skimming from a joint venture, a side hustle with a Turkish intermediary that was supposed to be off books, but had ballooned into a money-laundering mess tied to opioid routes snaking through the Balkans. The feds were circling, DOJ whispers in the wind, and if it blew back, it'd torch not just his career, but my sister's life, their 2 kids' futures. "Take the hit," he begged, eyes like a kicked dog's. "Sign this addendum. Make it look like your oversight on those NATO deals. I'll make it right. Family. Lola. We're family. Stupid. God. So stupid." I did it because blood's thicker than ink. Because my sister Emily looked at him like he hung the moon. And because in DC, loyalty's the currency that buys you one more sunrise. I forged the trail. A bogus audit trail in my contracts. Timestamps fudged to overlap with his laundering dates. Emails accidentally forwarded to the wrong servers. It was a mistake I'd pay for in spades, a felony indictment hanging over me like the sword of Damocles. My security clearance revoked. My name splashed across Politico as the queen of questionable clauses, while I lawyered up in a walk-up studio, scraping by on freelance gigs for think tanks that wouldn't touch me with a 10-foot pole. Mark? He ascended. Promoted to partner at his firm. rubbing elbows with the Joint Chiefs at Andrew's AFB barbecues. His silly contracts cancellation memo, filed under my name. Of course, framed as a heroic cleanup that saved taxpayer dollars. But revenge isn't a light switch. It's a slow burn. The kind that chars your soul from the inside out. I started digging 6 months after the plea deal, community service, and a $200,000 fine that left me eating ramen in Adams Morgan dives. Late nights at the Library of Congress. Poring over declassified FOIAs under the guise of historical research, my laptop humming with VPNs thicker than DC. Fog. The first crack came from a whistleblower tip on SecureDrop, an ex-lobbyist from Mark's firm. Bitter over a pink slip, spilling that those canceled contracts weren't axed for efficiency. No. They'd been sold under the table to a shell corp in Cyprus. Rerouted to private militias in Ukraine's gray zones, profiting off the very chaos Nato was meant to contain. Millions funneled back to Mark's Cayman accounts, laundered cleaner than his conscience. I confronted him at Emily's birthday gala, a glittering affair at the Kennedy Center, where crystal chandeliers dripped like guilty tears. He was mid-handshake with a Ukrainian attaché, that trademark grin flashing veneers whiter than his lies. I sidled up, champagne flute in hand, and murmured, "The Agia Napa transfers? Mark. Cute shell game. How's it feel to arm both sides while I rot?" His face didn't crack. Years of poker with senators had toughened him, but his grip on the diplomat's hand went white-knuckled. Later, in the coat check, he cornered me. "You don't know shit. Lola. Drop it. Or Emily finds out what you did for me. The forgery? Your prints are all over it." Twist of the knife. He wasn't just betraying me. He was weaponizing my sacrifice, holding my sister's ignorance like a grenade pin. I played along for weeks. The dutiful in-law, at family Thanksgivings in Chevy Chase, carving turkey while plotting his carve-up. But the antagonist in this farce wasn't just Mark. He was a chameleon, flipping alliances like a DC. Weather vane. One night, buzzed on bourbon at a CFR afterparty, he pulled me aside in the cigar lounge, smoke curling like confessions. "Okay, Lola. You win. I was wrong. Let's partner up, real this time. I cut you in on the residuals. 50-50. His eyes pleaded, that boyish charm resurfacing. The one that had hooked Emily at a Dartmouth mixer. Was it remorse? Or another layer, baiting me to incriminate myself further? I bit. Because controversy's the spice of revenge. Decisions that make you question if you're the villain in your own tale. We met in neutral ground, a nondescript Starbucks in Arlington. Laptops open to encrypted ledgers. He transferred a taste, $250K wired to my offshore drop. Proof of good faith. "See? We're square," he said, sipping his flat white like it washed away sins. But as I traced the funds later, from my Beijing noodle shop stakeout, remote access, baby, perks of the trade, I saw the flip. He'd looped in the feds anonymously, tipping them to suspicious activity on my end, painting me as the mastermind reviving the old scams. His moxie? Claiming it was protecting the family, a preemptive strike, before I could expose him fully. Schemer to the core. Mark Hargrove, betrayer, beggar, backstabber in one breath. The tension coiled tighter than a spring in Langley. Emily started noticing my late-night calls, the way I'd flinch at Mark's texts, coded with emojis that hid dead drops. "What's going on with you two?" she'd ask over brunch at Le Diplomate, her fork pausing mid-bite of pain au chocolate. I'd deflect with sisterly bullshit. "Just business. Eminencia. You know, DC. but the secrets gnawed. A buried crime I'd shouldered, not just for him, but for her, the opioid ghost that could have orphaned her kids if I'd let it blow. My mistake? Thinking family meant forgiveness. His underestimating the woman who'd memorized the U.S. code like bedtime stories. Crescendo hit during a nor'easter that blanketed the Beltway in white silence. The kind that muffles screams. I'd hacked his home server, Child's Play with a phishing link disguised as a kid's school newsletter, and downloaded the motherlode, emails to a Russian cutout, bartering Nato scraps for compromat on US.
Brass. Teason lite.
The sort that gets you a black site vacation. Armed with USBs and a burner phone full of timestamps, I drove to McLean, wipers slapping like accusations. He answered the door in silk pajamas, scotch in hand, surprise flickering before the mask snapped on. Lola, it's 2 a.m. Emily's asleep. Emily's the reason you're still breathing. I cut in, shoving past into the foyer. The scent of his cologne, Credaventus. Power in a bottle, turning my stomach. Upstairs, in his study overlooking the Potomac's frozen sheen, I laid it out, printouts, wire transfers, the works. Cancel my silly contracts. Mark, you auctioned them to the highest bidder. And now, you're flipping to Moscow for pocket change. He paced, that lawyer's mind whirring, then stopped, face crumpling in a performance worthy of Oscar. It was all for us. Lola. The debts from the laundering, they were crushing me. I had to. But I can fix it. Testify with me. We take down the real players, the Turks, the Russians. Whistleblower status. Immunity for both. The offer hung. Controversial as a leaked memo. Ally with the devil to burn the inferno? It split me wide, join him. And I'd be absolved. Maybe even hailed as the hero who thwarted a shadow war. Betray him fully. And the fallout scorches Emily's world. Kids whispering about Aunt Lola the snitch at Thanksgiving. No one's hands clean. His schemes had dirted us all. I hesitated. The storm howling outside like the devil's laughter. And, in that beat, he lunged, not for me, but the shredder, feeding pages like communion wafers. That's when I drew the .22 from my coat pocket, the one I'd bought off a sketchy contact in Anacostia, unregistered and cold as my resolve. Kneecap, I said, voice steady as the Potomac's current. The shot echoed, muffled by thunder, and he howled, collapsing amid confetti of incriminating snow. As sirens wailed distant, neighbor's nest cam. Probably I knelt, pressing the USB into his palm. Your choice now, brother. Burn it all. Or let the world see the man behind the mask. The ambulance ride was a blur of fluorescent hell. Paramedics barking questions I answered with rehearsed amnesia. Intruder.
Scared.
Self-defense.
Mark.
Pale as the morphine drip, squeezed my hand, not in forgiveness, but warning, his eyes screaming, this isn't over. Emily arrived at Fairfax Hospital like a hurricane in scrubs, her ER shift abandoned, face a war zone of confusion and fury.
Lola.
What the fuck? You shot my husband. Her voice cracked over the beeps of monitors. The antiseptic sting mirroring the rot in our veins. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing the half-truth, his confession about the contracts. The fear he'd turn violent. Lies layered on lies. But family? It bought me the night. By dawn, the feds swarmed, FBI suits with badges like Judgment Day, hauling laptops and raiding his safe like it was Bin Laden's cave. The headlines hit by noon. D.C. Power couple implodes. Defense scandal rocks NATO allies. My name stayed buried. A footnote in the chaos.
But Mark's?
Front page felon. The Yale boy turned traitor. His flip-flops exposed in Technicolor detail. The cypress shells cracked open, revealing not just millions, but a breadcrumb trail to compromised U.S. intel. Drone codes bartered for dirt on a Veeps affair. Enough to topple administrations. Controversy erupted like Beltway fireworks. Was he a lone wolf? Or pawn in a deeper game? Pundits on CNN split the screen. Hawks decrying soft on Russia oversight. Doves crying witch hunt to cover contractor greed.
Me?
I was the ghost in the machine. The sister-in-law who'd pulled the trigger. Anonymous in protective custody at a bland Quantico safe house. Trading statements for silence. But revenge's aftertaste is ash. And mine soured fast. Emily visited twice. Her eyes hollowed by sleep deprivation and tabloid vultures circling their McLean McMansion. First time. She brought coffee black. No sugar. Like our old sister rituals, and sat across the Formica table. Hands trembling. He says you framed him. Lola. That the shooting was payback for something old. The contracts? He swears he was protecting you. Her voice wavered, caught between love and the ledger of his lies. I fed her the sanitized version, his late-night plea, the buried secret of his laundering that I'd shielded to spare her pain. I took the fall once.
Eminencia.
He twisted it into this. She nodded, tears carving tracks. But doubt lingered like humidity. Had I pushed too far? Was the knee a mercy? Or the first step in matricide of our bond? Mark, from his holding cell in Alexandria, orchestrated his Houdini act. Lawyers descended like locusts, his firm's old guard, spinning narratives of coerced testimony and duress from familial strife. He flipped again, this time to the prosecution, cut a deal naming names up the food chain. From Turkish fixers to a rogue NSC aide with Kremlin ties. In exchange, reduced charges, wire fraud, not espionage, probation over prison, a slap on the wrist for the golden boy. And me? He pinned the silly contracts revival on my unhinged vendetta, leaking affidavits to Fox that painted me as the jilted operator, bitter over a family feud. The twist gutted me. Buried in Discovery docs. That opioid laundering? It wasn't just his mess. Emily knew. Fragments. Anyway, late-night whispers she'd overheard. A bank alert she'd ignored for love's sake. My sacrifice? Built on her complicity. A secret we'd both chiseled into the family vault. Tension peaked at the arraignment. A circus in federal court where air buzzed with blackberries and whispered odds. I testified from a curtain booth, voice modulated through speakers, recounting the study showdown minus the gunpowder specifics, self-defense as prelude to his confession. Mark, in orange jumpsuit that clashed with his tan, met my gaze across the oak divide, mouthing sorry with lips that lied for a living. The judge, a Reagan appointee with a hawkish squint, banged the gavel on a plea. Time served. Restitution to NATO funds. And a gag order thicker than the Potomac mud.
Outside.
Protesters clashed, Ukraine flags waving against America First signs. The betrayal fracturing into partisan shrapnel.
No winners.
Just shards. Mark limped free on a cane. Emily filed for separation in a quiet Chevy Chase lawyer's office. And I, exiled to a freelance purgatory in Baltimore row houses, ghostwriting op-eds for think tanks that paid an exposure. Yet the antagonists, Moxie endured. 2 months post-plea. A manila envelope slid under my Fells Point door. No postmark. Just the scent of Mark's cologne. Inside, a single USB, labeled Truth Serum, and a note in his looping script. You wanted the Empire?
Take it.
But finish what we started. Plugging it in over lukewarm IPAs at a harborside dive. My screen bloomed with the unredacted motherlode, Nato blueprints I'd thought destroyed. Now digitized and annotated with buyer's marks from a Qatari sovereign fund. He'd held back the crown jewels. Flipping one last time, not to the feds, but to me, a poison chalice. Sell them? I'd be richer than sin. Untouchable in Andorra. Expose them? His deal unravels. Dragging Emily's alimony dreams down too. The decision loomed. Controversial as voting your conscience in a swing state. No right path. Just the illusion of one. I drove south that night. Chesapeake Bay Bridge spanning like a tightrope, wind whipping salt into my wounds. Mark waited at a crab shack in Crisfield, the eastern shore's forgotten fringe. Cane propped like a scepter. Lola, he greeted, cracking a claw with surgical calm, butter dripping like deferred tears. You're late, over steam rising from Old Bay piles. He laid bare the endgame. The Qatari deal was his parachute. A nest egg for Emily's sake. The kids' college. Her therapy bills from this shit show. But twisted in, my father's old Vietnam contacts. Ghosts he'd exhumed to broker it. Leveraging the very sacrifices I'd honored. You think I didn't know about Dad? The regret? I finished his work. Lola. In my way. The revelation split me, his schemes not malice, but a warped homage, burying crimes under the weight of legacy. We'd both shouldered mistakes, mine. The forgery for family, his. The sales for redemption. As thunder rumbled offshore, I weighed the USB like a heart. Destroy it. And we're ghosts together, release it. And the world burns brighter. One more flip. Mark, I said, sliding it across the checkered cloth. Testify full. No deals. Or I walk it to Langley myself. His eyes, for once, held no mask, just the hollow of a man who'd chased shadows till they consumed him. For Emily? A nod. The pact sealed over the dregs of our beers. Controversial closure. Ally in atonement. Or co-conspirators in the grave. Dawn broke over the bay like a reluctant confessor. Painting the water in bruised purples as Mark and I hashed the surrender, him dialing his handler on a burner. Voice steady as he spilled the Qatari coordinates. Me live-streaming the call to a DOJ tip line from my phone's hidden app.
No dramatics.
Just the click of keys and the hush of waves lapping pilings. The kind of tense quiet that precedes a verdict. By noon, black SUVs churned gravel into the crab shack lot. Agents in windbreakers cuffing Mark with a gentleness reserved for high-value flips. You're doing the right thing, one murmured. But his eyes flicked to me. Are you? Emily called as they loaded him, her voice a razor over the line. Lola. He's gone again. What did you do? I hung up without answering. The weight of her fracture heavier than any indictment. The fallout cascaded like dominoes in a K-Street fever dream. Headline screamed, NATO leak averted. Insider turns on Shadow Network. My anonymity shattered when a leaked dashcam from Crisfield pinned me as the mysterious accomplice. Pundits piled on. MSNBC hailed Mark as redeemed rogue, a controversial hero who danced with devils to deliver the goods. Breitbart branded him a patsy. Me, the feminist fixer, engineering a deep state purge. The split deepened at family gatherings, or what was left of them. Emily's divorce finalized in a Bethesda courthouse. Her lawyer citing irreconcilable betrayals, but over coffee at a neutral Starbucks in Silver Spring. She cornered me. You could have stopped this sooner. Without the gun. Without dragging Dad's name through it. Her words landed like slaps. forcing the mirror. Had my revenge mended or mangled? No absolutes, just the gray of choices where love and loathing blurred. Mark's trial.
6 months on in the E.
Barrett Prettyman Courthouse became DC's summer spectacle, hotter than the humidity clinging to the mall. He took the stand in a bespoke suit, cane traded for a crutch. Spinning a tale of reluctant informant, I flipped for my family, Your Honor. For the sister-in-law who saw through me when I couldn't. Gasps rippled me. The betrayed. Recast as his conscience? Emily testified, next. Voice quavering over custody papers. Admitting her buried knowledge of the laundering, I looked away because I loved him. But Lola. She carried it for me. The courtroom cleaved, jurors nodding at redemption arcs. Spectators hissing at enablers. My cross-exam? A minefield. Defense attorneys grilling me on the knee shot. Vigilante justice. Chemist. Hargrove? Or calculated coercion? I met their stares. Unflinching, it was the only language he understood. Contracts or bullets, pick your poison. The antagonist's final flip came in closing arguments. Mark's lawyer unveiling a bombshell exhibit, my father's declassified Vietnam dossier. Redacted lines revealing he'd greenlit similar off-books trades, arms for intel. Morals for missions. Like father, like daughter, the counsel intoned, twisting my legacy into complicity. Controversy ignited. Post-trial polls showed viewers deadlocked. 60% saw Mark as the villain redeemed. 40% me as the avenger unmasked. Sentencing? 5 years at FCI Petersburg. Minimum security with therapy credits. A slap that sparked riots outside. Ukraine expats torching effigies. While MAGA diehards decried two-tiered justice. Emily got the house. The kids. A settlement fat with frozen assets, bitter fruit from our poison tree. In the twist's afterglow, I rebuilt from the rubble. A consultant in Alexandria basements, auditing contracts for NGOs wary of DC's wolves. No empire. Just equilibrium. The silly deals revived under cleaner auspices. Nato firewalls fortified without the blood money. Emily and I, fractured but fusing. Holidays in Rehoboth Beach, tentative with forgiveness. Her texts pinging midnights, miss you. Cease. But trust? That's the real casualty. Mark wrote from prison. Letters smudged with regret. You saved me from myself. Lola. Or damned us both. Jury's out. The ending? No tidy bow. Happy in the haze of survival. Tragic in the scars that mapped our map. Readers, you'd argue it over beers at the old Ebbet. Was the need justice or jihad? The flip salvation or slight? In America's grand, gritty theater, no one's wholly right, wholly wrong, just players in the revenge reel. Spinning till the credits roll on what-ifs. As for me, Lola Hargrove, no more ghost, but guardian of the gray, I raise a glass to the betrayed, the betrayers, the in-betweens. In DC, where power's the pulse and secret's the heartbeat, revenge isn't victory. It's the echo that lingers, daring you to listen.